The Appaloosa came in without a rider, head low, flanks dark with sweat. One saddlebag twitched. Jonah Hale lifted the flap and heard it. Not wind, not leather. A breath like a plea. Mama. The rail yard sat between the black prairie and the blacker sky. Lanterns threw small circles on cinder and rail. Somewhere, a switch clanged. The Appaloosa shied from the turntable, snorted steam, then stood as if it had carried its duty as far as it could. Jonah slid a hand over the animal's neck. Old scars there, a good mouth on the bit. No blood, no rider in the shadows, just the bag. A good bag, too. Oiled leather, brass buckle rubbed bright by use. The flap lifted in his fingers. Warm, damp air breathed out. Easy, he said to nobody, and eased the bundle free. A cotton shawl. A small hat pin stuck through as if to hold something closed. He touched the pin away with a thumb, and the shawl fell open. Inside lay a child with hair like wheat chaff and eyes not quite open, lips working at air. She was 9 months if she was a day. Her breath made a moth sound. Jonah's chest did a thing he didn't let it do. He put the shawl back around her without thinking, tucked edges like he'd seen once and never forgot. "I've got you," he said, voice too rough for those words. "I've got you." The Appaloosa stood waiting like a man at a grave. Jonah looked in the bag again. Beneath the shawl, a canvas ledger strip, oil-stained and folded twice, with a freight stamp from the land office in Kestrel County, and a notched brass key. He slid both into his coat. The baby made that breath again, like the world was a cold room and she was asking it to wait. Jonah swung her up and felt how close the edge was. He tucked her inside his coat where the heat was and ran. The telegraph office was the only place in Sage Junction that never fully slept. It shared a wall with the depot and a stove with the night. Inside, a wire clicked messages across the dark, little bites of lightning turned to handwriting. Temperance Vale looked up from the key when the door blew open. She'd cut her hair to her shoulders after her husband died, because it was easier that way. And she wore a man's waistcoat when she worked nights, because men left her alone more that way. She didn't startle easy. She still started. "Jonah?" "Found her on a riderless horse," he said, closing the door with a heel. Breathing but thin, he opened his coat. Temperance slid around the counter, already moving. "Stove's hot. Here." She pulled a wool blanket from a chest and laid it by the iron. "Turn her face down on your forearm, palm on her chest. Tap 2 fingers along the ribs. Slow. Make the breath remember." Jonah did it. He did what people told him when it made sense. "Who sends a horse like that?" "Somebody who can count on the dark," she said. "Hold her." The baby coughed a dry cough. A hiss of air came after. Temperance put a kettle on the hob and a cup near, tested the heat with her wrist. "No milk, but I've got sugar water until Carter can boil a bottle. Lord, girl, don't you leave on my watch." Jonah set the small weight against his chest and felt the small fight in her. "What would you do?" he asked, not to Temperance, to the part of the night that listens. "Ride past and let the law have it, or stop and let it have your name?" Temperance met his eyes. "You already know." He did. They worked without chatter. Temperance's hands moved sure. Jonah's hands moved careful, like he was reassembling a gun he hadn't cleaned in years. The kettle sang. Sugar water hit the lip of a spoon, and Temperance painted it on the baby's mouth. The child's tongue worked. A swallow went down. "Again," Temperance said. They did it again. Then again. The room warmed by inches. The stove hummed and the wire ticked, and the baby's breath found a beat it liked. The muscles at the corners of Jonah's jaw unclenched 1 notch. Temperance had a way of watching without looking like she was doing it. "You've done this before." "No," Jonah said. Then he shook his head once because he didn't feel like lying even in that small way. "Not like this." She nodded. She took the baby into her hands with a steadiness that told him she had once held a thing she had to give back. "We don't name yet," she said to the child. "Names stick hard." The baby made a small sound like a bird trying a new call. "Dr. Carter," Jonah said. "He's on Front Street." "He's sleeping," Temperance said. Let him sleep another quarter hour while we give her warmth and sugar. We'll need him for the rest of the night." Jonah watched her work. The wire clacked. Kansas City. 2 words he didn't catch. Dodge. A place neither needed to be. The door stayed shut. The Appaloosa's breath smoked under the awning like it had built a small winter for itself. Temperance finished the 3rd pass of sugar and put her cheek to the baby's forehead. "Warm enough to move," she said. "Take my scarf." Jonah wrapped the added wool. "You coming?" "I am," she said, already lifting her ledger to the safe. "Nobody steals from a telegraph office with me in it, but I'd rather not test a fool this evening." They stepped out together. The Appaloosa turned toward them, as if its job wasn't done until the bundle left its sight. Temperance put her hand on the horse's blaze. "Good boy," she said. "You did it." They crossed 2 doors to the physician's. Jonah didn't bother with politeness. Knuckles, wood, and then the latch. "Who's dying?" Dr. Ambrose Carter demanded from his doorway, shirt half-buttoned, hair gone to war with the pillow. He saw the bundle, and the fight went out of his shoulders. "Give her here." Carter's room smelled of carbolic and boiled linen. The lamp caught the brass of old instruments and the soft curve of new ones. He set the baby on a towel and moved with hands that had spent a career teaching bodies to try one more time. "Cold," he said, palm on the belly. "Thirsty." He glanced at Jonah. "Where?" "Rail yard, riderless horse, Saddlebag." "Of course," Carter said, as if it were a thing you hear of and hope not to see. "Temperance, heat that rag." He checked the mouth, the eyes, the fingers. "No bruising, good." He looked at Jonah again. "If you hadn't opened that bag, she'd be gone by dawn." Jonah looked at the towel, not the doctor. "She said mama." Carter didn't smile. He didn't not smile either. "Sometimes the world gives you a word you need, so you go ahead and keep moving." Temperance moved around the stove like it owed her money. She handed Carter the rag. He rubbed the feet, firm but kind. "There you are," he told the baby, as if telling a patient where the door was in a dark room. "There you are." He held a bottle to the light, tested it, and then to the baby's lip. A latch, a swallow, a pause, another swallow. "Good," Carter said. "Very good." Jonah felt his shoulders drop another notch. He hadn't known he'd been holding them so high. The wire in Temperance's head clicked when the telegraph wasn't. "Who rides an Appaloosa hard at midnight and doesn't come for it?" she asked. "Who sends a curve of a ledger and a key with a child?" Jonah pulled the canvas strip from his coat. Carter touched it with the back of his finger to keep his hands clean. "Land office stamp," he said. "Kestrel County. That's a long way to write a secret." Temperance looked at the key. Strongbox key. Freight house or land office safe. Not a home lock. Carter nodded like they'd confirmed a thing he'd suspected. "You two are going to wish this was just a cruel soul with a hard heart. This smells like paper and men with hats." "What would you do?" Temperance asked, and now she was asking him. "Tell the sheriff and let the wires do the rest? Or keep quiet until we know who is owed the truth?" Carter answered for them. "You tell the sheriff, because if you don't, he'll be told anyway, and he'll remember you forgot him," Jonah said. "Then I'll go." "No," Temperance said. "I'll send a runner. You stay with her." Jonah could have said he didn't sit with babies. He'd ridden with men who thought the word made you soft. He didn't ride with those men anymore. He took the chair by the stove and set his hand near the little body without quite touching. It was enough to feel the heat and know the work was working. Temperance was back in less than a minute. "Boy gone. Sheriff will come." She studied Jonah the way she studied a wire when a storm ran over the line. "You're thinking about leaving?" "Thinking about who will come in right after the sheriff goes," he said. She nodded. "You remember how it feels to be hunted?" "I do." Carter had the bottle at a tilt now, keeping air out of the nipple. "She's taking it. That's the part that matters right now. The rest will answer in order." The baby finished and turned her head toward Temperance's voice. Temperance didn't say a word. She just breathed a song without notes. "We don't name," Carter said, echoing her earlier line. "But if you did, you'd pick something that grows where rocks try to have their way." "Not tonight," Temperance said, and that settled it. The sheriff came heavy on the steps and soft at the door. Ira McKendry had a paunch that just about matched his patience and a mustache that looked like a broom he'd once repaired with twine. He took in the room the way a man takes in weather. "Found her at the yard, did you?" he said. "A riderless horse," Jonah said. "Of course it was," McKendry said, using the doctor's same words. He stepped close and tipped his hat back. "Show me only what I need to know, Doc. I don't sleep well when I know more." Carter lifted the blanket back 2 finger breadths. McKendry's mouth went tight. "You tell me if she coughs," he said to Carter, then to Jonah, "and you tell me about that horse." Jonah told him what he knew, which wasn't much. He did not mention the ledger strip or the key, not because he meant to hide anything, but because some things have to be put down in the right order or they break the table they land on. McKendry listened. He listened the way a pond listens, nothing on the surface, everything underneath. "I'll see if anyone lost a horse they can't mention without an ache," he said, "and I'll send word up the wire, Temperance. Unidentified infant recovered at depot, seeking mother." "Nothing else?" Temperance nodded. "Nothing else." McKendry tipped his hat to the baby the way you tip to a woman in a doorway. "Keep her warm," he said. "I'll be back when my breakfast sits down." He looked like he might say more, then he didn't. When he'd gone, the room let itself breathe again. Carter set the bottle aside. "She'll sleep now. That's a good thing. You both should too." "Not likely," Temperance said. Jonah stood and rolled his shoulders. He hadn't decided anything he could say out loud. He had decided one thing. If men with hats came, they would not walk out with a bundle. The wire rattled once. Temperance's head turned. "Nothing for us," she said, but she didn't sound convinced. The Appaloosa stamped outside as if it had heard an old name. Jonah went to the door and looked through the glass. The yard said what it always said at this hour: iron and sleep. He was wrong. It said something else tonight. It said, wait. He went back to the stove. They built the next hour in small bricks. Temperance cleaned the bottle. Carter wrote notes in a tight hand. Feeds, breaths, color. Jonah watched the rug by the door because the rug moved when Boots came. It moved. The latch clicked. The door opened the way some men open a ledger, slow, like they own not only the book but the alphabet inside it. A tall man stepped in, hat brim low, coat plain but cut by a city tailor. His badge did not shine because he didn't keep it for shine. "Dr. Carter," he said, voice even. "Miss Vale, Mr. Hale." He knew their names like he'd ordered them from a catalog. Carter didn't ask who he was. "Marshall." "Bram Hollis," the man supplied, almost kindly. He turned his head and took in the room in a sweep. He didn't look at the baby long. Men like him learned not to. "What do you want?" Temperance asked. "The same as you," Hollis said. "To see a child kept safe." He showed the paper in his hand. "Federal writ of custody. Evidence seizure in an ongoing investigation into land fraud, mail tampering, and murder. The infant was used as leverage by parties under color of law. She is now evidence." Carter's jaw ticked. Temperance's hands folded slow. Jonah's hands did not move at all. Hollis let the paper rest on the table edge, like a card that wins whether or not anyone wants to play. "I'll take the evidence now," he said. "You can visit her at the territorial office when the case is concluded." "What would you do?" Temperance asked softly, eyes on Jonah. "When a man calls a baby evidence." The stove popped. The Appaloosa stamped. The baby made a small sound without words in it, and somehow it was louder than the marshal's paper. Marshal Bram Hollis didn't blink. "Hand her over." "No," Temperance said. One word. No tremor. Carter didn't look up from the baby. "She's a patient, not fit to travel. That's my medical judgment. You want to overrule it, you do it in daylight with the judge awake and the town watching." Hollis set the writ flat. "Doctor, the law says best interest," Carter cut in, "and that tiny chest is still deciding if it trusts air. You move her now, you risk it deciding no." Hollis studied him, then Temperance, then Jonah. He could smell when a room had already chosen a hill. "Dawn," he said. "I'll be back at dawn." He pointed at the bundle. "Do not disappear my evidence." He stepped out without slamming the door. Power never needs to. The room exhaled. What would you do, Temperance said under her breath, between now and dawn? Find out what that writ is hiding, Jonah said. Carter nodded to the counter. McKendry left a notice. Temperance unfolded the paper the sheriff had brought earlier and pushed it across. It wasn't a poster. It was stationer's stock with too much ink and not enough soul. Information wanted regarding a missing infant. $1,000 for discretion and return. No signature, just a line. On behalf of Kestrel Development Company. Kestrel again. Land ring, Temperance said. Water and deeds wrapped up as development. Jonah took the notched key from his coat, heavy as a promise. This turned something in Kestrel County. Temperance lifted the ledger strip and held it to the lamp. The freight stamp bled through like a bruise. Waybill 24-17. If the wire logs still sit in the drawer at the depot, we can read who ordered what, when. Carter rocked the baby, eyes on her breath. Go, he said to Temperance, and take Jonah. I'll hold the fort. If Hollis comes back early, he can argue with my medical Latin. Temperance was already wrapping her scarf. Jonah pulled his hat down, set the key in his vest pocket, and kept one hand on the door latch a second longer than a man who wasn't used to leaving something precious behind. Borrow my words if you need them, Carter said, and turned back to the tiny fight on his table. They crossed to the depot by back alleys and sleeping yards. The Appaloosa trailed them to the awning and planted itself like a sentry. Temperance smiled at the horse without breaking stride. Good boy, keep the night honest. Inside the depot, the clerk's lamp was out, but the moon knew the corners. Temperance went behind the counter like she'd been doing it all her life. She slid open a drawer, found the wire logbook, and set it under the window. Read, Jonah said. She did. Kestrel Land Office to Hollis 2 days ago. Sees evidence in custody of unauthorized parties at Sage Junction. Infant referred to in prior. Hollis to Kestrel. Proceeding under federal writ. She turned a page. Kestrel to the law firm in Abilene. Reward notice posted. She turned another. And here. Freight house record. Waybill 24-17. Trunk 1, crate 1, private strongbox 1. To be held pending key. She looked at Jonah's vest. Jonah looked at the floor. What would you do if the thing in your pocket could make the wrong men right? Temperance closed the book and picked up the lamp. Open it before they do. They left the depot doors they'd found it and walked the side of the platform to the freight house. The big room held shadows like a church holds secrets. Temperance touched the hasp with 2 fingers. This isn't it, she said. It's inside. They stepped between crates until they found a private cage with a small iron door set into a wooden wall. The keyhole was new metal. The number 24-17 had been chalked and then wiped as if someone wanted it to be both there and not there. Jonah set the notched key and turned. The bolt slid with a sound that made him think of choices that don't unchoose. Inside sat a strong box the size of a bread pan and twice as heavy. He lifted it to a packing table. Temperance didn't look over her shoulder. She listened. The town stayed asleep. The wire stayed still. Jonah turned the second lock with the same key. The lid opened to a stink of oil and paper. On top lay a stack of deeds with names he knew. Small places, small creeks, signatures that wobbled the way hands wobble when someone is watching too close. Under that, a packet of letters tied with blue ribbon. Under that, a pistol wrapped in oiled cloth. Temperance tapped the ribbon. Blue, midwife ribbon. Women use it to mark a birth bundle. Jonah loosened it. The letters were from a woman named Rose Calder to someone she called Ada. Not Crowell, just Ada. Speaking of work at the land office, of papers that didn't match the people who signed them, of a baby that would be no one's secret. The last letter had a brown smear where a tear had fallen before it dried. If I don't make the ride, the saddlebag goes to Sage. The horse knows it. Tell her when she asks someday, I tried. Temperance's throat worked. Rose put the child in that bag to keep her away from the men who made this mess. Jonah set his hand over the letters as if they were a pulse that could be kept. If Hollis gets this box, he gets to decide whose mess it is. And if we keep it, Temperance said. "We're thieves." "What would you do?" "Steal it," she said, without blinking. "We're not taking money. We're taking the chance to tell this right." They wrapped the papers back tight, left the pistol in the box, tucked the letters and a handful of deeds under Jonah's coat, relocked the cage, and turned the lamp down to a breath. They were almost at the door when the freight house service entry creaked. A small figure slipped in and jumped when Jonah moved. She put a finger to her lips and then recognized them. "Ruth Toller," Temperance breathed. "You'll scare 10 years off a woman." Ruth held her shawl tight. She was the night sweeper and sometimes clerk, 20th a day, with coal dust on her cuffs and a straight spine. "I came because I couldn't sleep," she whispered. "Hollis's deputy waited in the office an hour, then sent a wire secured by morning. He thinks he's got time." "What do you know?" Temperance asked. "And what do you guess?" Ruth's eyes flicked toward the strongbox cage. "I saw Rose ride out 2 nights back with a child on her chest. She said if she didn't come back, the horse would. I found her scarf on the south grade this afternoon, blood on it. I didn't find her." Jonah felt the room tilt. "You sure it was hers?" "She stitched tiny stars along the edge," Ruth said. "Same as that ribbon." She touched the blue ribbon in Temperance's hand. "Silas Crowell's men have been in and out all week. Hollis with them twice. They think if they call it federal, nobody will call it crooked." Temperance put a hand on Ruth's shoulder. "You didn't tell me because you were afraid." "I didn't tell you because I was afraid I'd say it like gossip," Ruth said, voice tight. "I wanted to be sure." "You're sure now," Jonah said. Ruth nodded. "And I'm sure they'll come before dawn if they catch a whiff that you open that lock." Temperance smiled like a woman who had already decided to do a harder thing. "Then we don't be here when they do." They stepped back into the night and moved the slow way that feels fast when your heart is doing sums. At Carter's door, the stove heat met them like a friend. "News?" Carter asked. "Enough to make a liar blush," Temperance said. She told him in short pieces, the way a person reads a telegram when the wire is dirty, and set the letters on the table like they were a sleeping thing. Carter didn't touch them. He looked at the baby. "Name," he said, surprising them both. Temperance cocked her head. "We said we'd wait." "Men with hats are coming to call her evidence," Carter said. "Let's call her something that reminds us she isn't." He nodded toward the window where the Appaloosa stood in lamplight. "Sage comes up through cinder," he said. "But I like mercy better. Mercy doesn't ask why. It just stays." Temperance's mouth softened. "Mercy, then." Jonah said the word once. It sat right in the room. Mercy made that almost word again, soft and stubborn. Her fingers found the top seam of Temperance's waistcoat and held on. Boots on steps, not McKendry's weight. 2 men. The latch turned. Hollis walked in with the deputy Ruth had mentioned, and 1 more behind him. He didn't raise his voice. "Dr. Carter, I'm shortening our arrangement." Carter stood. Temperance rose with Mercy on her shoulder. Jonah didn't move. He was already where he needed to be. "You bring a judge?" Carter asked. "I brought the law," Hollis said, and set his palm on the writ, "and the authority that rides with it." "Authority doesn't walk out with a baby," Temperance said. "People do." Hollis held out his arms. "Miss Vale, if you please." Mercy turned her face into Temperance's neck. Her small hand clutched, then patted, then clutched again. The room went so quiet Jonah could hear the wick turn. Temperance didn't step. "No." Hollis's eyes cooled a shade. He nodded to his deputy. The man looked 19 and scared of making the wrong kind of history. He reached out, slow and careful. Mercy cried, not a wail, something thinner, sharper. She reached past the deputy, past Hollis, and made a sound that wasn't a word and somehow was. "Ma." Temperance's throat worked once and then settled. "I'm here," she said. Hollis's jaw flexed. "I am not the villain in your local play," he said. "This child was used in a federal crime. She will be kept safe." "By men who call her it?" Temperance asked. "By procedures that don't get tired," Hollis said. Jonah lifted his hands a little, palms out. "Marshal, you're not wrong about the crime. You're wrong about the safest place for a baby in the next 12 hours. Leave her. Take us. We'll walk with you to the depot and talk names and places until your patience or the sun runs out." Hollis considered. The deputy glanced at the baby, and then at his own boots. The door banged again. Sheriff McKendry filled it this time with a shape that made the room feel smaller and safer at once. He didn't look at Hollis. He looked at Mercy and tipped his hat. "Marshal," he said finally, "if you take that child before the judge sees her, I will put you in my jail for the length of my temper." "You don't have that authority," Hollis said mildly. "I'm aware," McKendry said, "but I have the keys." Hollis smiled with only one part of his face. "I won't wrestle the child. I'll wrestle the writ. Doctor, I'll be at the depot. Bring Mercy," he said the name without committing to it, "at first light, or I'll come with more paper and the men it draws." He turned. His men turned with him. At the threshold he paused and looked back at Jonah like he'd suddenly remembered a number he meant to write down. His eyes dropped to Jonah's vest, where something thick and squared had made a shape. "Search him," Hollis said, almost pleasantly. The deputy stepped, apology written all over his face. Jonah didn't back up. He set his hand on the table and the letters came out from under his coat of their own weight. Temperance slid her palm over them, simple and plain. "These are not yours," she said. Hollis read their edges like a gambler. He did not reach. "You are now accessories," he said. "Add that to your paper," McKendry said, "and add this. At sunrise, this town's going to want to say." Hollis's eyes flicked to Carter, then Mercy, then the door. "Dawn," he said, and was gone. The room didn't move for 3 breaths. Then everything moved at once. "We don't run," Temperance said. "If we run, we tell every scared soul in Larkspur that the law is a thing you dodge, not a thing you bend back to shape." "We don't hand her over," Jonah said. "We don't," McKendry agreed. He rubbed his mustache with his thumb and forefinger. "Judge Waverly will not like being woken at 5. He'll like a federal writ less, but he'll like the street full of voters least of all. We'll give him the crowd." Carter checked Mercy's color and listened to her chest. "She'll handle a carry across the street at dawn if we wrap her well, not before." "Then we hold the line," Temperance said. "What would you do?" she added, looking at Jonah, "to make a town show up for a baby at daybreak?" Jonah looked at the telegraph key in Temperance's office beyond the wall. He looked at the Appaloosa's ears pricked toward the door. He looked at the letters from a woman who tried. "I'd ring a bell the law can't ignore," he said, "and tell the truth in words even a tired man can read." McKendry nodded slow. "Do it." Temperance lit the little lamp in her eyes. "I'll put it on the wire to every porch and pot-bellied stove we've got." She set Mercy in Jonah's arms for a second so she could cross into the telegraph office. Mercy stopped crying when her cheek hit Jonah's coat. She made a small sound, not "mama," not anything a dictionary would claim, but it chose him anyway. He closed his eyes, felt the grip of her hand on his thumb, and let something mended hurt the way healing does. Outside, the Appaloosa lifted his head and snorted at the dark, like he could smell a sunrise readying itself. Temperance's key rattled like rain over iron. The wire sang to kitchens and bunkhouses, to the livery and the section shacks, judge at first light, baby safe, come quiet, come many. Sheriff McKendry took the rest on boot leather, 3 hard knocks per door, 1 sentence per porch. "What would you do," the story asks, "if the law said evidence and your gut said child?" You put on your coat. By gray hour, Front Street hummed. No guns out, no shouting, just breath and hats and eyes that had decided to be present for whatever truth showed up. Carter wrapped the baby so only her nose and 1 small fist showed. "Mercy," he said, like a promise, and handed her to Temperance. Jonah walked close enough to touch an elbow without seeming to, and the Appaloosa ghosted along the boardwalk as if the town had become its herd. Judge Ephraim Waverly looked like a man built to sit, not stand. He wore a black coat shiny at the cuffs and a face that said he'd rather be asleep. He took the chair above the depot room, rapped once, and let the murmur settle. "This is not a trial," he announced. "It's a question. Where does a baby belong? This minute, this morning, in the best interest of her life." His gaze slid to the side. "Marshal Hollis, you have paper." Hollis stepped up with the writ like a preacher with a verse. Federal custody. Infant used in a racketeering enterprise. She must be removed to the territorial office. Waverly skimmed. Dr. Carter? Travel risks her, Carter said flat. Dehydration last night. Temperature still low. She needs continuity of care for 72 hours. Noted. Waverly peered over his glasses. Sheriff? McKendry's mustache twitched. If you hand her to a stranger, Judge, you'll need twice as many deputies as I own. That's not advice, Waverly said. It's weather. He turned to Temperance. Miss Vale. She isn't a crate, Temperance said. She's a person with a name. We're not doing names yet, Hollis said mildly. We are, Temperance said, just as mild. Mercy. Eyes flicked like minnows. A word had been placed that wasn't on Hollis's paper. Waverly raised a hand. One at a time. He looked at Jonah. You? I found a riderless horse, a heavy saddlebag, and a child trying to keep breathing, Jonah said. I'm not here to tell the court what the law says. I'm here to say who was there. Waverly nodded as if to a stable witness. Who else was there? Ruth Toller, Temperance said, lifting a hand. Ruth stepped forward, coal dust washed off but not gone. She kept her voice steady. I saw Rose Calder ride with a baby 2 nights back. She said if she didn't make it, the horse would. I found her scarf on the south grade. Blood. I did not find Rose. The room breathed in. Who's Rose Calder? Waverly asked. Clerk at Kestrel Land Office, Ruth said, and a friend to women who need one. Waverly's gaze shuffled to Hollis. Marshal. Miss Calder's missing, Hollis said, which is why the infant is material to a murder inquiry. And to the child's life, Temperance said. Both can be true. What would you do, the story asks, when the facts serve 2 masters? Waverly made a small tent with his fingers. I will see the papers. We don't have them, Hollis said quickly. Temperance laid the packet on the table. We do, she said. A handful only. We took them to keep them from being disappeared. Stolen evidence is still evidence, Waverly said. He untied the blue ribbon and read faster than his body promised. Deeds with shaky signatures. Names that didn't match the homesteads they supposedly owned. A letter in a woman's careful hand. If I don't make the ride, the horse will. Tell her I tried. Waverly's mouth lost a little blood. He put the letters down as if they were hot. He looked out at the room. Silas Crowell? Crowell stepped forward like a building choosing to relocate. He wore a black hat and a suit with lapels wide enough to host a picnic. A lawyer from Abilene hovered at his elbow like perfume. Your Honor, Crowell said, voice buttered, this is a family matter. My daughter recently returned from confinement back east. She is delicate. Certain unscrupulous parties seek to profit from a private sorrow. Whose sorrow? Temperance asked. Mine, said a voice from the doorway. Ada Crowell looked smaller than her father's stories, and stronger. She had a wool traveling cloak and wind-burned cheeks and a way of holding her chin that did not match fragility. The room opened for her. Crowell's face froze a fraction. Ada, I wanted a different life, she said, eyes never leaving Mercy. I did not want my child to be your excuse. She moved forward as if across ice. Temperance angled Mercy so the girl could see and decide. Children know things in their bones that paper doesn't. Mercy watched Ada's face the way a bird watches a branch. She didn't reach, she didn't cry. She made a small sound that belonged to no one yet. Ada's throat worked. I am her mother, she said, words simple because hard ones get simple when they are true. Then why the saddlebag? Waverly asked, not unkind. Ada did not look at her father. Because when I told him, he told me the child would be handled. Rose told me what handled means in a town where men own ledgers. We ran. She put Mercy on the horse when the chase caught us. She swallowed. I lost them in the dark. Hollis's jaw ticked once. Miss Crowell, your statement carries weight, but the federal case? Waverly raised a finger. Marshal, you will not interrupt a mother in my court. He exhaled and faced Ada. What do you want? This morning, not for the rest of the world. What do you want for your child? Ada looked at Temperance, at Jonah, at Mercy's unblinking eyes. I want her alive, she said, and loved. I can give the second. The first, I trust these people you keep speaking around. She nodded toward Mercy's tiny hat. She knows their voices. Crowell took a half step, lawyer fanning. Your Honor. Sit, Waverly said without heat. Crewell did, stunned to find his joints obey. Hollis tried again, quieter. Judge, I can keep the child physically safe in transit. I cannot guarantee the safety of this town if federal paper is ignored. And I cannot guarantee my self-respect if I ignore the child, Waverly said. He rubbed his eyes, then leaned forward. Here is my order. The infant called Mercy shall remain in the immediate medical care of Dr. Ambrose Carter for 72 hours. Temporary guardianship for the duration is granted jointly to Temperance Vale and Jonah Hale. The mother, Ada Crewell, shall have access under Dr. Carter's supervision. After 72 hours, we reconvene. Hollis blinked. Judge, Marshal, you may appeal to the territorial bench or bring me a newer paper, Waverly said. Bring 5. I will drink coffee on them. Today, we keep a baby alive. The room did not cheer. It loosened, like a hand that had been a fist all night. Hollis inclined his head. I will telegraph my superior. He looked at Jonah. And I will be watching what you do with those letters. You'll watch me walk them into daylight, Jonah said. Mercy shifted, then stood on Temperance's thigh the way a fawn makes a first try. Jonah put his hand up without thinking. Mercy pressed her palm to his, testing balance. She didn't step. A step would come later, but she made a sound that made 3 adults blink hard. Pa. Not a word, not yet. An echo of one. Enough to rearrange a man. Crowell's lawyer started to object on something precise and small. Crowell didn't hear him. He looked at his daughter, and for the first time, something like a question crept in under the big hat. Ada didn't look back. What would you do, the story asks, now that you've won morning but not the day? Waverly rapped once. Court in recess. Doctor, keep that child warm. Sheriff, keep the peace. Marshal, do not mistake patience for surrender. Hollis folded his writ. I never do. As people began to drift, Ruth squeezed between shoulders, eyes bright. South grade, she whispered to Temperance. If Rose fell, she might have crawled off the cut. Temperance looked at Jonah. Jonah looked at Mercy and then at the door. We can search in pairs, he said. Careful, quiet. We owe her a find. McKendry grunted. I'll pull men who can keep their mouths shut. Carter tucked Mercy closer. Bring what you find to me first, he said. Bodies belong to doctors before they belong to paper. Ada stepped close to Temperance, hands shaking but held out anyway. May I try? Temperance shifted Mercy with care. Mercy studied Ada's face again, then reached for a curl that had fallen from the hood. She didn't cry. She didn't call a name. She simply allowed. Sometimes that is the first grace. Ada closed her eyes and breathed like a person who'd been underwater and found air. Jonah loosened his shoulders. We'll be back by noon. Hollis watched them gather and go. He didn't move to stop it. He didn't help either. He sent a boy for a wire and began to write a report that would either save his career or set it down in a drawer. Outside, the Appaloosa tossed his head toward the south grade, as if he already knew where feet needed to land. They took the south grade in pairs. Sheriff McKendry with Ruth, Jonah with the Appaloosa ghosting ahead. Temperance stayed with Mercy and Carter. Ada waited by the clinic window with her hands clenched in her cloak. Frost silvered the bunch grass. Coyotes had stitched the cut bank with their little knives. The track bent where the roadmen had shaved too close to shale. The Appaloosa stopped. Ears pricked. He breathed a soft warning through his nose. Easy, Jonah said. A torn scarf snagged on rabbit brush, blue edge stitched with tiny stars. Rose, Ruth breathed. They slid down the loose shale. Under a tilt of mesquite where the shadow held the cold, a woman lay on her side, arm curled around nothing. Her lips were cracked, one sleeve dark with blood dried to brown. She opened her eyes like it cost. Don't, she rasped. Don't let him. We won't, Ruth said, already putting her canteen to Rose's mouth. We won't let anybody. Rose coughed. Horse knew the way. I fell, lost the bag, kept the letters in my—" Her hand weakly touched her bodice. "Took them too." "We have them," Jonah said. "They made it to the stove and the doctor and the judge." Rose closed her eyes and let a tear run sideways into her hair. Not sadness. The other kind. Relief that hurts. "What would you do," the story asks, "when the person who started the rescue needs rescuing?" You carry. Jonah lifted her like you lift a partner out of a ditch, steady, not showy. McKendry cut brush to make a drag. The Appaloosa leaned into the traces without being told. They climbed back to the road in a slow, honest way that didn't bounce the hurt. Carter had the table cleared. "Set," he said. Ruth told it in broken lines while Carter worked. Graze at the ribs, fever from cold and fear, water carefully, broth soon. Temperance stood with Mercy on her shoulder where Rose could see the baby without trying to sit. Rose's eyes found the child. "Mercy," she whispered. Temperance's mouth twitched. "We named her that so we wouldn't forget what to be." Ada stepped to the foot of the table, fingers twisted in her cloak. "I am Ada," she said. "I'm the—" Rose's mouth made a tired smile. "I know." Boots on the step. Marshal Hollis, alone this time. He looked at the table, at Rose, at the scarf. Something in his shoulders let go that hadn't shown itself before. "Miss Calder," he said quietly, "you're making my report easier and harder." Rose swallowed. "You can put my name on the part that burns." Hollis nodded once, like a man signing a thing no one else could sign for him. "Who ordered it?" Rose stared at the ceiling as if names lived in the plaster. "Kestrel Development, through the Abilene lawyers. Crowell is money in mouth. The plan was land swaps with dead men's signatures and scared widows. The baby was to be handled when she made the paper messy. The saddlebag was plan B, mine." She coughed. "I aimed the horse at the wire." Hollis's jaw worked. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," Rose said. "Go arrest someone worth the ink." Hollis looked at Temperance, at Jonah, at Mercy. The word evidence did not come anywhere near his mouth. "Judge Waverly is still at the depot," he said. "If Miss Calder can stand a litter, I'll get sworn statements before any of Crowell's men think to burn their ledgers." "She can't stand," Carter said, "but she can speak." "Then I'll bring the judge to her." Hollis tipped his hat to Mercy, an inch only, the size of a man learning, and left as quick as a pen stroke. Waverly came with his clerk and his eyes fully awake this time. Rose gave her statement as Carter dosed her with broth. Ruth gave hers and did not shake. Jonah gave his and didn't puff it bigger. Temperance gave hers and left out nothing delicate enough to bruise in daylight. Ada spoke last. Crowell tried to enter once, but McKendry used his bulk like a polite door. Hollis stood to the side with his badge the color of steel weathered to purpose. When the judge finished, Hollis stepped into the street and said a few short words. Men moved. Crowell was taken into custody at the depot before he could climb his carriage step. The Abilene lawyer found he had more luggage than arguments. 2 land clerks decided they'd rather trade testimony than time. The federal writ that had tried to claim a baby found better work with ledgers. At noon, the town exhaled. Waverly signed a set of papers with a hand that didn't hesitate. 72 hours stand, he said. Then we reconvene formal. But understand me, Mercy stays as she is until doctor. Carter says different. Marshal, if your superiors want to fight, they can have me. He tucked the orders in his coat like a man tucking away something dear. Miss Calder, rest. Miss Vale, Mr. Hale, keep doing what you somehow already knew how to do. Hollis paused in the doorway before he went to load a prisoner. I wasn't the villain, he said to Temperance without defensiveness. You weren't, Temperance said. You were the law. Today, you were also right. He accepted that without smiling. Ada hovered as if balance were a new language. May I hold her again? She asked. You may, Temperance said, and placed Mercy into Ada's arms like placing a lantern on a porch you'd like to visit again. Mercy studied Ada's mouth, then sat back against her shoulder with the full weight of a child who has decided a thing will do. Not surrender. Permission. Ada closed her eyes and let 2 tears happen without hiding them. "Thank you," she said, "to no one and to everyone." Jonah set a hand against the Appaloosa's neck through the open door. The horse let out a long, quiet breath, as if a job had finally been understood by all the hands involved. What would you do once the fight shifts from rescue to raising? You make a life. They rang the depot bell at noon on Sundays now, not to call trains, but to remind a town what it had chosen. Rose Calder healed. She took a desk in the Larkspur clerk's office with Ruth as her right hand and a locked drawer for the papers that keep people honest. Kestrel development dissolved into court dates and thin apologies. Crowell waited for trial far from his columns. His hat did him no favors in a narrow cell. Ada moved into a small house with sunlight on the stoop and began writing her own letters, short, clear, not stamped with anyone else's seal. Marshall Hollis sent a note from Santa Fe that said only, "The case proceeds. Keep the child warm." It was the kind of sentence a man learns after he has seen the wrong nouns on the wrong lines. Judge Waverly signed a guardianship for the season and set another date to make it longer. He made the town bring pie to the hearing so he could claim he did it for hospitality when he was really doing it for the part of him that liked seeing people choose each other. Dr. Carter went back to being a man in a clean room with an empty chair no one talked about. He allowed himself a smile the day Mercy toppled a stack of clean towels and laughed like a creek. Temperance and Jonah did not speak vows in front of a preacher. They spoke them in small ways. A chair moved closer to a stove. A crib built, even though both claimed not to know how. A habit of reaching for the same ladle at the same time and not letting go. Mercy's first clear word was mama. Her second was not pa. It was horse, sequence truth. On a day when the wind felt like it belonged to the town and not the other way around, they walked to the rail yard. The Appaloosa, now fat with good oats and better stories, nuzzled Mercy's shoulder while Temperance laughed and Jonah pretended not to. Mercy put her hand on the horse's blaze and looked up at the depot bell. She did not remember the night it wouldn't ring. She remembered the noon it did and the faces that turned toward her when it did. What would you do if a town gave you back your life? You live it where people can see, and you keep the child warm.